Our story even matter when I feel to the top with fear, but it's all just a bunch of matter. You're not really. I don't want to be either. I wanna be next to you. Black and gold, black and gold, black and
Thank you so much, Danielle. That was a great performance.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and it's so great to see you.
It's very nice to see everyone.
For those of you who don't know, Danielle is a singer and songwriter, and she's also a professor at Algonquin College. We're so happy that you could join us and sing for us before we have our keynote speaker.
Can't wait.
Thank you. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle, and I work with the AC Hub. And like everyone else, we have shifted the way that we offer our services. So the AC Hub has partnered with corporate events so we can host large-scale virtual events that range from wellness activities to workshops and masterclasses. And this series is open to the entire Algonquin College community. So the events are open to learners, employees, and alumni because we're all in this together. We're all going through this together. So we have lots of events to look forward to. And it's also been so great to connect with everyone in such an authentic way. I mean, right now, we're all kind of in each other's homes. You're in my living room right now. And before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. We ask that you please stay on mute to start. So you can do this on your screen, just change it to mute, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions live during the Q&A session, as well as during the breakouts. And we want to encourage you to all turn your cameras on for a little bit of face-to-face time. Now we're going to try something. We'll see if it works. I'm going to ask everyone a question just to get us sharing and connecting and inspired for Komal's talk. So please type your answer to the question in the chat box and don't send it until everyone's had a chance to write it out. So the question is, what sets your soul on fire? So don't send it. And I'm going to count everyone down from 3. What's your passion? What sets your soul on fire? Okay, if everyone's ready, we'll count down. 3, 2, 1, send your answers. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. It's great to see everyone so engaged.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Great, love the energy. Awesome. Okay, so now moving along, we're going to bring out our next speaker. And when we were trying to figure out or trying to decide who we wanted to introduce our special guest speaker, we couldn't think of anyone more fitting than the Dean of School of Media and Design, Robin Heaton. Dean Heaton is a leader in her community. She's on the board of directors for Women in Communications and Technology, the board of directors vice chair for the Ottawa Film Office, and at Algonquin College, Robin is an inspiration to faculty, support staff, and admin. Robin caters to learners who are exploring what sets their souls on fire through media studies programs that promote creativity and innovation. So now I'm pleased to introduce Robin Heaton.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Just a big shout out to Danielle Allard, one of our faculty members in the School of Media and Design, so sharing her beautiful voice today. Thank you, Danielle. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our first community-wide virtual event. We're really happy that you're able to attend and join us today. It's more important than ever that we, as the Algonquin College community, connect and maintain relationships. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us to participate in this very important session, where our guest speaker will talk about strategies to process and move through uncertainty. I would say that's very timely right now. So, on to the reason why we're here. I am thrilled to introduce Komal Minhas. Komal is a cancer survivor, entrepreneur, filmmaker, and media personality. Named to Oprah's hashtag SuperSoul100 for her work on the documentary film Dreamgirl, Komal is now the host of Lessons Learned, a talk show exploring stories of resilience and rising so we can create our blueprints for coming through hard things. Most recently, Komal interviewed former First Lady Michelle Obama during her Canadian Stadium tour. Komal has spoken at the White House and Harvard University, and her work has been featured on NBC, The Huffington Post, and Forbes. That's quite the resume. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Komal Minhas. Komal?
Hey, everybody. I am so happy to be here today. This is the first day I've put makeup on in about 6 weeks, let alone do my hair and put real clothes on. But don't worry, I still have my sneakers on my feet. Back support is important. I am so excited to be here. Oh, I am muted. Am I muted? Can you hear me now? Perfect. Okay. We are good to go. Thank you, Michelle. So Michelle, what a great idea with the Set Your Soul on Fire question. It gave me so much insight into who is with us here today. And that even in quarantine, even in a pandemic, even during unprecedented times, we are still lit up by so much. And that which guides us and makes our soul a light has not been taken from us. And that, I think, is a very important place for us to start. Because even in the hardest of times, even in the most challenge that I've experienced, whether it's in my life or in my career, when I could remember who I am, what motivates me, and why I'm here, and what work I'm here to do, nothing could stop me. Now, I want to share a little bit about myself before we dive into what I'm here to teach you today. So I'm someone who has faced a lot of hard things in my life. I'm 30 years old, and my 20s were filled with so many ups and downs. And also my teen years, grief and loss of loved ones, surviving cancer, neurological illness, having the highest highs of my career, like being named to Oprah Super Soul 100, getting to meet her and so many incredible people right there on my wall back there, while also facing the most devastating of personal traumas one could endure. And all of it made me so much stronger and more capable to show up for my life. It allowed me to understand my own resilience very early on in my life and my career, and made me understand the importance of empathy, soft skills, emotional intelligence, even when we are trying to be our most successful, impactful selves in the world. What I've learned through my life is that we can't forget ourselves in the equation of our impact and who we want to be in the world. In fact, it's our priority to remember ourselves first. And a quote that has been resonating deeply with me right now, who here has read Untamed by Glennon Doyle Melton, or it's on their reading list? Hands up in the chat, or just say me in the chat. Glennon Doyle is an author. She is someone who became very well known because of her blogging and writing online. And I had the privilege of seeing her speak in Brooklyn, New York, when I lived there a few years ago. And during that time on stage, she said so many impactful things that hit my heart. One was asking the question, what breaks your heart? That's who you're meant to serve in the world. That question lit something inside of me that helped me realize that what is most important to me, what sets my soul on fire, is helping women and girls unleash their own potential, help them realize their own potential. Something she said in her book, Untamed, that has stuck with me is that we can do hard things. We can do hard things. Now, she wrote this book a year ago, and now it was brought to publication. She was supposed to be on her book tour. Little did she know that the words that she wrote a year ago would become an anthem for so many of us as we face this global pandemic. Yesterday, when I talked to my mom and my grandma, I was recording an episode of my show for Mother's Day about the lessons we've learned from our mothers. And when I was talking to my mother and my grandma, I was transported back to our village in India. I was born and raised in Canada, but I've had the privilege of going back home to India to stay in my familial village many times. And when I thought of this statement, we can do hard things, It reminded me of some young women that I met back home. Raj and her sisters were incredible young women. And I remember going, and they would help my grandma when she was home in the village for a few months at a time, help with little tasks around the house. And I had the opportunity to hang out with them. And Raj's sister was getting married when I was there. So I got to go to parts of her wedding ceremony. We would dance through the streets of our village together, celebrating the union that was to come. Raj would tell me about how the wedding planning was going, the things that their family were excited about. You see, there wasn't a lot of light or joy in big moments for Raj and her sisters. Her father had left the family, their mother had passed away. She was being raised by her maternal grandmother. And this wedding was a very big moment for this family. A few months passed, and I remembered those wedding celebrations, and I was talking to my grandmother one day, and she said, I have some very sad news. And she shared with me that Raj's sister had come home from her marriage, had decided to leave her marriage because her husband turned out to be very abusive. And when she came back to the village folk were very incessantly hard on her and her family, because divorce and leaving partnership is not something that's traditionally done in my society and in my culture. And so Raj and her sister ingested pesticides as a form to leave this earth and leave the pain that they were going through. And they passed away. And their loss impacted me so deeply, because that village could have been where I was raised. That could have been the home that I would call my own. Instead, I had the privilege of being born in Canada, in a place where my parents raised me as equal to my brother, raised me in a way where my gender did not inform the negative ways in which I could be raised in this world. When I think of Raj and her sister, it breaks my heart. What breaks your heart? That's who you're meant to serve in the world. That moment, that conversation with my grandmother, that remembering of the celebration with those young girls who were not much younger than me, elevated my understanding of why I am here and what I'm here to do in the world. And my grandmother took it upon herself to help fund Raj's older sister's education, Amin. And now Amin is a nurse, and Amin might be coming to Canada soon. And Amin found a way out of that hardship of her reality, of losing two of her sisters, of being in a village where she was not supported, of having very little family, to now build a life of her own. Amin is my reminder that in the face of such trauma and loss, of losing your siblings in that kind of a traumatic way, that we can come through hard things. We can come through hard things. Now, I've been doing some research on resilience and stories of rising. I knew that my experiences in my life and the ways that I've come through hard things and the way that I've seen women like Amin come through hard things, or my mother or my grandmother, I knew there had to be some sort of formula. How do we build our resilience? How do we become stronger in our lives? I knew there had to be a way for us to synthesize this or understand it, so that in a time like now, where we're all going through hard things together, that we can look to how do we build resilience in ourselves. And fortunately, the University of Pennsylvania has done a lot of research on resilience and positive psychology. And so I have been able to deduce from my lived experience, and now this research from these authors from UPenn, a little bit that I'd like to share with you of 4 factors of resilience that we can lean on within ourselves when it comes to facing challenging things like we are right now. When COVID first hit, I forgot that I am capable of coming through hard things. I forgot all the things that I had come through in my life. And this is our brain's response to hard things. How many of us have survived a trauma, and when we look back on it, it doesn't necessarily feel as hard as it used to? Or perhaps we actually compartmentalize it. The brain has a magical way of making hard things more manageable. How many of us, I'm not a mother, so I will not say us, but how many have gone through childbirth and then think, oh, it wasn't that bad, maybe I'll have another kid? It's our brain's way of making sure that we as women are open to having children again. So one aspect of rising and resilience that is key is community. So connection to community. In the resilience factor, there was a case study done on 9/11 survivors. A family was secondarily impacted by the 9/11 attacks. They didn't know anyone personally, but they lived in New York City. And so there was secondary trauma and their own secondary trauma just from being in the city. And one factor that Stacy, the mom of the family that was studied, showcased was connection to community. So I want to applaud all of you for showing up today for yourself and leaning into this community that Algonquin has brought together. There are 136 of us on this call right now. We are all going through this shared experience together, and we're all trying to unpack different aspects of it within ourselves. And that's no small feat. When I went through my cancer diagnosis and my subsequent neurological illness, I had to move from Brooklyn, New York, where I was building our company, where I had to leave my startup, where I had had the highest highs of my career. I had to leave within 2 weeks. I woke up one morning and I didn't have vision in my left eye. My optic nerve had become inflamed and I could no longer see out of my left eye. And I wasn't sure what was going on. And I went and I saw the doctors, and they shared with me that there's a high likelihood that I might have had multiple sclerosis. And when that diagnosis hit, or that potential diagnosis hit, I knew there was so much in my life that I had to change. Up until that point, I was overworking myself. I thought I will be successful at all costs. I'd grown up with immigrant parents whom I had seen work day and night, not taking a break. So why would I ever imagine taking a break? But in that moment, I realized that I had to pause. I had to bring my life back home, and I had to lean on the community that I had. And it was during that time that I realized there weren't a lot of resources around stories of resilience and rising. When I was in my sickness and came back home to this place, I sat in that bedroom next to me, and I would face the hardest parts of my inner traumas, of the things I went through in my childhood, of the things that led me to being so unwell. And I was broken. And I didn't think I could stand back up. I didn't think I could bring myself back to this person that I am now. I didn't think I would be able to keynote again. I couldn't see out of my left eye. I couldn't hold conversations with multiple people at once. How was I even going to imagine becoming this version of myself again? It seemed impossible. I searched for stories of resilience and rising, and I found some here and there, but I didn't find them in a cohesive place where we could all come together and learn from one another and the hard things we'd come through. And so I decided to build it. Lessons Learned is my talk show and community where I share stories of resilience and rising of my life and allow others to share with me as well. It's a collective education tool for us to learn how to come through hard things. It's my avenue for sharing all of the knowledge that I've learned through resilience, all of the knowledge that I've learned through my career so far. Community is such a key aspect of coming through hard things. And so I have questions for you. So if you have a journal around you or a piece of paper or a note on your computer, now's the time for you to pull it up. Part of how I'm going to be structuring the rest of this talk is I'm going to be asking you questions, because what's the use in me sharing my story with you and inspiring you without an action plan for what you can take and move forward with? So pull up your notepad. My first questions for you are, what does your community look like? Who do you have in your corner? Who do you need to schedule weekly or bi-weekly time with to connect with right now? Michelle's going to add these questions into the chat box so that you guys can dive into them and review them. So when it came to Stacy, I'm going to just riff on community a bit while you guys are writing this. When it came to Stacy and her experience with 9/11, the reason that community was such a big aspect of her rising and her growth was because she leaned on those within her community who went through a similar experience as her, so that she wouldn't internalize the trauma that she was experiencing. They say that community actually helps decrease the likelihood of experiencing PTSD when it comes to going through traumatic events. And because this is a collective trauma, this pandemic, this self-isolation, this complete upending of our lives, this is a collective trauma. We have to ask ourselves, who can we lean on? Who am I not talking to? Do I need to make an appointment with campus counseling? Do I need to be calling my friends more often? Do I maybe need to be calling my mom more often? this is your opportunity to ask yourself, who in my community should I be connecting with, and do I want to be connecting with? I'll give you a minute more. So from community, what I came to realize as I was rising from being unwell was that I could only come through it if I believed I could come through it. A key aspect of resilience is something called self-efficacy. Our ability to believe we can come through the hard thing. Our ability to problem solve and come through the hard thing with an action plan. If we don't think we're capable of doing the hard thing, we will not even take the steps forward to try and attempt it. When I think about this, this is a more lighthearted story, but when I was pursuing the Michelle Obama interviewing opportunity, it started last December, and it was an opportunity that came kind of out of nowhere. I had been in recovery from my last surgery, which was in October 2018. I have endometriosis and I required a surgery, and it actually ended up being a 16-week recovery. So when I look around at self-quarantine, I kind of was set up for this because I had a 4-month recovery from a surgery. But that's another story for another time. And when that recovery was happening, it was only supposed to be 8 weeks, but it became prolonged because of complications after the surgery. And during that last 8 weeks, my mental capacity, or the grit that I had within myself to say, I will get better. I will not let this recovery take the most from me. I can take the next right step forward. This is prolonged. It is not ideal. It is hard. I cried a lot. There was so much pain that I endured during that time, but I said, I will still come through this better than the way that I was before this happened to me. That was my mentality. That was my mindset. And that's something I realized when I talked to my mom and my grandmother yesterday. That was a key aspect to their own resilience in their lives, was believing that they could rise, that they could survive the hard thing. And coming through that, I decided to take myself on a trip with a friend to Colorado. That was my present to myself, to go and see Michelle Obama in Colorado. And once we landed in Colorado, it became announced that Michelle Obama was coming and doing a cross-Canada part of her Becoming book tour. And she would be going to Edmonton, Alberta. I was born and raised in Grand Prairie, Alberta. I am an Alberta girl through and through. Being in Ontario is hard for me on some days. But all that to say, when I heard she was coming to Alberta, I decided I am going to pitch Michelle Obama, because I had the opportunity to be in the meet and greet in Colorado. I was going to pitch her directly to see if she would let me interview her on stage in Edmonton for her book tour in front of 10,000 people. And I still have in my notes the pitch that I wrote to Michelle Obama and the talking points that I did and the 45 seconds I condensed for that interaction so that it could be impactful, meaningful, and so that she would say yes. Because I believed she would say yes. I believed I could find the words to persuade her and her team in a way to allow me to take that stage with her. And when it came to that moment, Michelle Obama grabbed my hands and she said, "This is destiny." She said, "We were talking about this in my team last night about who would interview me on stage in Edmonton. Your timing is perfect." And she introduced me to her chief of staff. Had I not had the audacity to believe that hard thing was possible, that audacious dream was possible, I wouldn't have been able to take the stage 8 months later in Ottawa, in my home turf, second home turf. My mom would be very upset if I called Ottawa my hometown. Grand Prairie is my hometown, but it is my home turf. Had I not had that audacity, I wouldn't have been able to make it happen. And now that journey between that ask, I was told no for Edmonton for various reasons. I was told no multiple times for the Ottawa interview for various reasons. But at the end of the day, a week before that event in October last year, I was able to take the stage with Michelle Obama and ask her about her stories of resilience and rising. Ask her about how she overcame her grief and hardship. because I knew in front of those 8,000 people, if we could unpack the how of how someone we admire so much came through hard things, we would all be better off in how we could rise together. And that self-efficacy, that believing that I could, was the single most important factor, in my opinion, of getting that to happen. Community supported me through that journey. My belief in myself and that things could be better helped me make it happen. So when it comes to self-efficacy, it can feel really hard to believe that you can. It can feel really hard to be confident in yourself, to think that I can do this next hard thing. But competence leads to that confidence. So do you ever notice when you're going through a hard time, or there's a challenge in front of you, or you have to finish that paper or whatever it is, you second guess yourself and you are unsure of your own capacity to face the thing? A lot of the times people say, fake it till you make it. Confidence begets confidence. These things are true in some ways, but what the research tells us about resilience is that it's competence, doing something repeatedly, doing the hard thing over and over again, building that muscle in our brain to get used to the unknown. That is what leads to true and meaningful anchored confidence. And so my question for you now is, what are some difficult times you have walked through in your life? What are some things you have survived? Remind yourself of what you've come through. Write those things down right now. Again, Michelle is going to share these questions in the chat. And if you're finding it hard to write these things down, I challenge you. We as human beings are wired to survive. You have survived hard things. You have come through hard things on your own accord. And so I ask you now, give yourself the gift of reminding yourself of what you've come through. I'm not just doing this for unnecessary reasons. I have my list of hard things written down in my journal because it's on our hardest days, on the days right now when you don't feel like getting out of bed, on the days right now when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel your depression creeping in, when you feel your anxiety on the rise. It is on those days that something as simple as a list of what you've survived, when you look at that, it can be enough to change your state, to change your mind, to get you out of bed, to get you to make your bed, to get you into the right next step of your day. So write this down. What have you survived? What have you come through? Prove to yourself that you have done hard things. That is the competence that will lead you to being confident to know you will come through this period of time even better. So finally, my last piece, I'm mixing my last 2 points into one. From connection to community, creating our resilience, and self-efficacy being a big aspect of resilience. Our final piece that we're going to chat about is our health and well-being and getting organized. So when I was building Dream Girl, like I shared, we were going all out, working at all hours of the day. I know that that all-nighter life in college and university, 4 a.m. is like my ideal work time. I've had to work on that so that I can actually function during the day. But I would work incessantly and I wouldn't give myself credit for the work that I was doing. And I worked so hard and through so much burnout that this neurological issue came to pass, and the stress that I was going through amplified it. And so I had to relearn, or I had to teach myself and mother myself for the first time in my life in 2017, when I was 27 years old. I had to teach myself how to take care of myself. And now that we're all at home, this is probably slapping you in the face. You're looking at your routines, you're looking at your habits, you're looking at the things that you're doing on a daily, and you're realizing, I don't know what day it is. How many weeks has it been? What is going on? How am I supposed to get assignments done? How am I supposed to show up for work? How am I supposed to make sense of my days? And what has helped me the most, and has helped me through recovery, after rising, after loss, has been a schedule, my daily schedule. What am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing the day after that? How am I focusing on the important things? When am I applying for that grant application? that the government is providing students access to? When am I applying for my business loan? These are all things that I have leaned on my calendar and my schedule to get through hard times. And it took a lot of habit building for me to get there. And I wish I would have known this as a student. The other thing, students, that I want you to know, you are not failing right now. If you're asking yourself, why can't I show up and do the work I'm supposed to be doing? Why can't I finish this article? Why can't I finish this essay? Why can't I finish the workload ahead of me? Chronic stress is a hell of a drug. Chronic stress decreases your capacity to perform and show up. So your inability to maybe do all the things that you thought you were going to be able to do or that you could do pre-COVID, it's not your fault. It is actually the brain's response. Our prefrontal cortex is slightly less active now because our brain is trying to react and respond to chronic stress that is coming from COVID and coming from the daily news updates and coming from the scarcity that is coming because of this pandemic. So it's okay if you're procrastinating right now. It's okay if you need to ask for support from your professors. It's okay if you need to take a day. But as you do that, having a schedule that you can lean on in those hard times, there's nothing more supportive than that for you right now, I promise. It is the thing that is helping me get through this. Just looking at my calendar tomorrow and knowing in the morning I'm going to meditate and then I'm going to move. And then I'm going to dive into work after I shower and make my bed. And I'm going to do 4 to 5 hours of work, 6, 7 hours of work, but then I'm actually going to turn my brain off come 7 o'clock. And my husband and I watch a movie every night so that we can disconnect and then mentally prepare for bed. It's these little things that are actually so important in resilience building. Stacy, the person who I shared about who was studied after 9/11, it was task-oriented to-do lists and actions that supported her and her family to come through that trauma with a lower likelihood of PTSD than her counterparts. So your lists are so key right now. So my last question for you is, what are some daily activities you can commit to nourish yourself? And finally, what are the most important work or school or financial things that you need to make time for right now? Michelle, I bulked our last two questions together. So if you could update that in the chat, that would be perfect. And again, when I ask you to reflect on these things and write them down, your likelihood of actually achieving and doing the things that you write down is significantly higher than if we don't. So actioning these things, writing down what are the daily things I want to commit to is actually so important for your growth and development right now and for our ability to come through this well. And I'll share with you, I'll share this when we go into the breakouts because this is the question we're going to be discussing together. But for now, what are the things you can add to your daily routine or schedule that are for you, that are for your self-care, that are the hard things you need to do to be well? And what are the hard things in your life, in school, with your finances that you need to pay attention to that you can make time for? I see you writing. I see you not writing. I see some people looking at me being like, oh, she sees me. Uh-oh. So make your notes. Again, by this time, you should have a little summary of community that you want to lean on in your life, or action points that you want to take when it comes to community in your life. At this point, you should have an understanding or a list of the things that you've come through that are hard in your life, the things that can remind you of what you are capable of rising through. And you should also have a list of what you want your daily schedule to be, your ideal daily schedule, or the things that you want to do for yourself, and a little list of the hard things that you might not have been prioritizing or knowing how to make space for when it comes to school, finances, and work that you can now look at and then workshop yourself after this session is complete. So these are the things that I've found to be most effective when it comes to resilience and rising in my life, or with the people that I've spoken to. When I look at Amin and the life that she's built for herself coming out of the immense trauma that she went through with losing her sisters and her life as it was, showing up for school every day, finishing her nursing degree, making plans to maybe come to Canada. These things have helped her survive the hardest things that one might face in their life. And I know when you're hearing these things, they might be reinforcing for you that yes, these are the things that supported me when I lost so-and-so, when I made it through this hard diagnosis, when I had to move to school and change my entire life. These things are anchors for you as we move through this pandemic together. And one thing I'll share is that when I was going through my illnesses or losses, at times I would feel so alone because no one else was sick in my body than me. There were others who were facing cancers and different cancers and all of that, but I felt so alone in my lived experience in my body. There is a gift right now that we are going through a collective trauma. We know when we talk to anybody, they'll be able to relate in some way or another to our experience with COVID and with this pandemic and with self-isolation or with being on the front lines. Because I know Algonquin has such an incredible international student population. And I know that so many of you are our frontline workers, are the ones working in our fast food restaurants and restaurants. You're the ones who are helping us stay fed. So thank you to those of you who are on the front lines for us. We appreciate you so much and we see you. And we see that not only are you facing the hard thing of not being in your home country, but you're facing the hard thing of going through a pandemic, working on the front lines in a country that's not your own. So I see you and thank you for that. But just know that we are collectively grieving and that we can truly lean on one another in a way that we might not have been able to with other traumas in our lives. So thank you all so much. This is my formula for resilience. This is what scientists have told me is a very strong formula for resilience. And I know we can come through hard things together. So at this point, we are going to jump into some breakouts because what is a conversation like this without connecting to one another? So my question for our breakout is how can, or what is motivating you most right now? What is motivating you to get through this time in a healthy, happy way? What is going to be your through line through the rest of this pandemic? And I'll share with you, my through line is I want to come out better from this pandemic than I was entering it. Better defined for me is feeling well, knowing that I did my best, and knowing that I was able to pivot my company in ways that were meaningful. So, how do you want to come through this pandemic? What is your through line? We'll jump into our breakouts. We're going to have groups of 5 for us to chat through this together. I see people dropping off who aren't wanting to participate. It's okay. Thank you all for coming for those who are dropping off. But for those who are here for the breakouts, we'll be chatting very shortly. Thank you guys all for sharing with one another. As we wait for everyone to return, I want to just share a little bit of our takeaways from our group. One of the biggest motivating factors that we discussed was family and how important family is to keeping us inspired on a daily and keeping us motivated to make it through to this, whether it's grandchildren or our supports at home. That's a big part of it. Something that Arlene also spoke to about her students was how just the mere stress and volume for students right now of what is needing to be faced, whether it comes to work, school, being at home, and online classes. It's a lot right now. And I think that it's important to validate that and to honor that that is a, but at that specific age and with the expectation of you bearing this transition well, that's a lot of pressure. And it's okay that it's a lot of pressure. So I would suggest leaning into resources. Like if you probably don't want to read more now that you're doing school, but The Resilience Factor is a great book. Untamed by Glennon Doyle is a great book. There's a book called Emotional Agility. And these are books that you can probably get audiobooks of or listen to podcasts from these authors. But I'd suggest listening to things that can help support you understanding your stress response right now. And I'm happy to share the list of these things following this call with Michelle to share with the community as well. So we're going to finish off with some Q&A. So I'll throw it over to Michelle to lead this portion of the event.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. And if anyone has any questions for Komal, we just invite you to please raise your hand. And you can do this in the participants tab. And if you prefer, you can just type out your question, and then we'll call upon you there. Okay. Just going through to see if anyone has their hand up. Okay, there was a question from Melanie. It was the book recommendation. Oh, she wants us to add the book recommendation in the chat.
Okay, for sure. I'll do that as we wait for the next raised hand.
Okay, and we do have a question from Rebecca. So I'll invite Rebecca I can unmute you, or I think you're already unmuted, and you can say your question.
Hi, I was just curious, and how do you deal with failure or burnouts?
Yeah, do you want to share a little bit of, and you don't have to, but would you like to share a little bit about your experience? Because usually when people ask me this question, it comes from a place of, I'm either facing this or I've been through this, and I think that some advice would be helpful for others around this.
Just through academics and schooling, I had kind of like my first burnout. I'm identifying as it, but I'm not too sure if it was a burnout. It felt like one, just pushing myself too much at school,
100%.
And then
yeah.
You have to experience one, unfortunately, to actually feel on how to be more mindful, I guess, to yourself.
Didn't realize we're burnouts. My sister would say this to me. She was like, why is it that when you come home from school, you just turn into a blob? She's like, I would love to have like the bright, peppy, lovely Komal that happens during the school year. Like, why, when you come home over the holidays, are you just empty? And it was before we had the vernacular around burnout and what this was. And especially when you're that age, it's hard for people to take you seriously when you're saying I'm burnt out, because they're like, you're young, you have all this energy, whatever. And it's like, no, the pressure and stress that we put on ourselves as students is incredibly high. And also the expectations for assignments, depending on the program that you're in, all of the things, and then the emotional aspects of being in school. I moved halfway across the country from Grand Prairie, Alberta to Ottawa and moved into residence in my first year. And I was 17 years old. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden you go from living with your parents to living with all these strangers, and you party and you do all these things and you're trying to keep up in school. It's a lot. So first I want to say, like, I had to validate and tell myself and support myself in the truth that life was full and life was hard. And then the World Health Organization last year created burnout as a diagnosis. It is now diagnosable. People can be diagnosed with burnout. And when I finished my run with Dream Girl, that was like burnout times 1,000. And so when it comes to recovering from burnout, the few factors that were most important to me were scheduling. Like when I look at my calendar now, maybe I'll actually just screen share with you so that you have an example to look at. So when I look at my calendar now, give me 1 second. I actually color code the various aspects of what I'm doing each day. So meditation and journaling is under self-care. So that's color coded in one way. My workouts have their own color code so that I can see visually how much of my day is going to each thing. Strategy work is here, meetings with my team is here, more strategy work, creative is red. But this color coding allows me to look at my week, and therapy is in there, and better understand how am I going to show up, and am I actually showing up for my self-care? Am I showing up to move every day? Am I showing up for my work? And am I actually stopping my work at a reasonable time? So this open time is usually a movie and dinner with my family. And then we're in bed, we try and be in bed by like when I came out of burnout, my only focus was scheduling my appointments, like my health appointments, and my movement sessions. And then I would build in time to create hobbies. So I make puzzles now. We play Monopoly Deal once a week. Because of being type A or because of the pace at which I was going at, I didn't have downtime. So I had to teach myself as I came out of burnout how to have downtime and how I needed to do one thing every day to allow myself to like come out of the, like to decompress my brain. So we're really good at doing work in Western society and North American society, but it's very hard for us to value the balance. I'm in a mastermind group with other female founders, and a pair in the group are doing a multi-million-dollar raise for their business. And they are up in the morning at 7 a.m. on their computers until 1 a.m. at night. And I get to we should be working all the time. Now is the time for us to better emphasize our own structures and routines at home, because that is what's going to elevate us out of burnout and make sure that we don't go into burnout while also in a pandemic. So scheduling self-care, scheduling movement, and getting used to having a hobby. And then around that, putting in your work. That's what I would say to that. So thank you for sharing. Next up.
Thank you. We have a question from Catherine LaRue.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for that. Just a couple of things I wanted to say more than anything. Kudos to you on your Michelle Obama approach. I've spent a lot of time in my career trying to encourage women to be a little more forthright, and that is just so phenomenal. I applaud you tremendously. More than a question, I just wanted to emphasize some of the things that you've said that resonate so strongly with me. I have a team of about 21 people. We're in the corporate training center for Algonquin. And we started day one of the working from home with a schedule that included a morning focus call, which was all about who's doing what today and who needs what support, and an end of day social coffee break, where there were two rules. And again, I heard a lot of this in what you were saying to us today. And the two rules are no talk about work and no negative talk about COVID. You can talk about resiliency and great stories. And I've really found, and again, that just resonated so strongly with me in your suggestions, that schedule, I hear you loud and clear, has really helped the team. And they've told us so. All of them have said, you know what, at first when I suggested to them that we would talk twice a day, that we would meet twice a day, there was a lot of, how can we do that? And after week one, everyone is on board and showing up and really saying it's extremely helpful. So thank you for emphasizing that.
Yeah, and I was a kid who didn't have a strong schedule. So for a lot of people, you might feel like, and my husband says this all the time, he's like, I'm disorganized, I'm not used to schedule. And it's like, this can be a learned behavior. Like I wasn't good at this before. I didn't know when to turn off or how to stop. But what I also developed in myself was a growth mindset. And this is something you can also look up. Another book I'd suggest is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And looking up conversations around a growth mindset. And what's funny right now is like, these are things that I've been talking about for years. But what's really neat right now as we're going through a pandemic is to say, wow, these are all things that apply really well right now. So that growth mindset is essentially retraining our brains to look at challenge and problems as opportunities. And to say, I don't have a schedule, I'm not good at creating a schedule, or that's a story I'm telling myself. How can I change that? And it's through managers who help encourage these sorts of things as well. So kudos to you as well, Catherine, for doing that for your team.
Okay, we're just going to have the last question. I recognize that it's just after 1 now. So the question will be from Matthew Jerebic. just unmute you, Matthew.
Hello, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time, Komal, to speak with us, and I'm so happy to see so many of these individuals that I work with and don't get to see as often and deal with in the community. So my question is, I'm a people person. I'm led a lot by my responsibility to others, not necessarily my responsibility to myself. The thing that drives me is doing well for the people that I know and care about. So how do you deal with telling yourself that it's okay that you need to take time for yourself when you are, beholden to other people for things you've, tried to do for them? And, if there's not enough time in the day to get that done, when is it, and how do you have you dealt with that is my question really, or do you deal with that? How?
Absolutely. So my husband is 100% an extrovert and I am like an ambivert. So I'm like semi-introvert, semi-extrovert. And when it comes to how he shows up for others, he's finding it very hard right now to prioritize self-care. And I would also say that when we're looking at it from a gendered lens, we don't often tell men that it's important to take care of yourselves or like to take time away or whatever that looks like. And so I'm here to encourage that this is like this, everybody requires this. And so what I would say to that is sometimes we have to trick our brains, and it's how can we remind ourselves and brain and ego and the programming that we have that the only way I can show up well for others and be more effective for others and be more efficient in the workload that I have is if I'm well. Because we all know what it's like to sit in front of our computers for hours and be like, I'm working, but you're actually not really working and you're being inefficient and ineffective. So it's like, if we actually gave ourselves permission to step away, to do the things to decompress our mind, when we come back to work, we can actually be more effective. And I see this in students all the time when we get mad at ourselves for procrastinating. I often believe that procrastination is not necessarily a bad thing. It might be a reminder to yourself that you need a break and that you need to step away. So if the deliverables are too much right now as well, communication is such a big part with teams. I've noticed, and like I said, around the brain capacity, just because of chronic stress we're all enduring, we've had to give more grace periods, but that also comes from empathetic leadership, and empathetic leadership comes from being empathetic with ourselves. So it's like this, we turn it into this self-fulfilling prophecy as extroverts or as people who are very helper oriented and externally motivated. It's like, right, I have to do this for me first, and then I get to show up like 100% for everyone around me. So that's what I'd offer with that. And that's what's worked with my husband. He's a gamer. So he's had to give himself permission to just game when he needs to. And we've set it up so that he can be in the living room gaming while I'm like not really working, but working on the couch. And that's our compromise. So we're having our time together, but he can also decompress his brain. So that's what I'd offer there. And I'd also say, I know that was the last question, but if you have any other questions, shoot me a message on Instagram. I'm very responsive. This is a time when we all need the best support that we can get. And I'm happy to be there to help in the ways that I can. And also the Lessons Learned podcast, my weekly show, I'm addressing different aspects of the pandemic and offering journal prompts and community spaces for us to talk through the hard things. So you can check that out at komal.com, KOMAL.com. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Komal. It was awesome.
And thank you, Michelle, for making this happen. This went from a DM. So like, let's talk about just
yeah, Instagram.
Oh, I think Michelle froze.
Okay, I'm back. Jeez. Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We're so grateful. It was awesome. And I definitely recommend your Lessons Learned podcast. So for everyone signs off,
shoot everybody. And you're back.
I'm back. Hello? Good?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Before everyone signs off, we are going to invite Danielle Allard back just to perform a couple of songs. And we'd like to take a couple of screenshots just of everyone online right now connecting together. It's so great to see all of your faces. So if you could please turn on your cameras, and then because there's several of us, we just have to go through a few different pages. So just hold your smiles. So we'll start taking them now. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. We do have lots of AC Always Connected events coming up, so stay tuned on the Algonquin College events page, as well as the Student Services social media pages. I think Leanne's going to add those links to the chat for us. And then, yeah, feel free to keep this webinar open as Danielle plays a couple of songs, and we'll bring Danielle back. Thanks, everyone.
My Zoom right before, so we're gonna see how this sounds now. I'm hoping a little bit better. And I wrote this song about social distancing, not about physical distancing. And that was before we were even talking about it, but it was just this concept that we can't really be islands. We need our community around us. So I'm really glad to see so many familiar faces on your little Zoom cameras right now. And I can't wait to see all of you in the hallways. Thanks so much, Komal, for that beautiful, beautiful presentation. And I think they're all life lessons that we can learn from. So this song's called Island. I'm not just a girl and I will stay inside. All the things that I've seen will make me run and hide. But all I hear is I should be alone. Yeah, I should live in fear. It's so hard to trust, so I shouldn't try. I need to build some walls if I don't want to cry. Don't rely on people in this town. Yeah, they'll break your heart. Yeah, they'll let you down. They say you should be an island, and I say, will that make me happy? Yeah, they say you should be an island, and I say, why do I feel empty? Oh, well, I can't live alone, I can't live in fear. We can all be loved on the spinning sphere. If we all get hurt and run away, well, these holes in our hearts, they won't go away. They say you should be an island, and I say, well, that make me happy. Yeah, they say you should be an island, and I say, why do I feel empty? Whoa, yay! Claps, claps, claps. Pretty great, because I won't actually put anybody to sleep. Life of a local musician is usually like 11:30 p.m. set times, so people don't like it when I play this song. This is Lullaby. It feels like I've waited a lifetime. I've been searching to find you to know the bliss in the sound of your heartbeat, as the hurried beat of my soul. Please let your voice be the last that I hear tonight. Please keep your arms around me till the morning light. Please promise me, cross your heart, say that you'll stay. Please let the light in your eyes keep my fears away. Please. Sing me to sleep. You quell the storm that's inside me, cured by the sweep of a fan. And I found peace in the sound of our silence, peace in the crisp morning, yeah. Please let your voice be the last that I hear tonight. Please keep your arms around me till the morning light. Please promise me, cross your heart, say that you'll stay. Please let the light in your eyes keep my fears away. Please. Sing me to sleep. Please let your voice be the last that I hear tonight. Please keep your arms around me till the morning light. Please promise me, cross your heart, say that you'll stay. Please let the light in your eyes keep my fears away. Please. Sing me to sleep. It's another song, and I'm glad to hear that it sounds good on your end. Thank you for your super nice comments. Meg, it's been so long. I miss you very much. I miss everybody who I'm currently seeing on video chat right now. So thanks for saying nice things and making me feel less alone as I sit here in my basement. This is going to be my last song, but if this is something that you're enjoying, the purpose is that it's something that's calming for you. And I do this at least every Sunday night. So I'm running something called Art Night Online, and it's not meant for artists. It's meant for people who have never made art before. Online the weekend that we were actually sent home, because all of my music industry art students, all of my performing arts students, and all of my public relations students had their performances and their charity events canceled that weekend. So the first night I did that art night, it was the first night I actually clicked that terrifying go live button, and I had no idea what was about to happen in my life, but we did it anyways. And I was supposed to be performing for my public relations students that night by the change of schedules. So we've all been last Sunday it was memes, so you can tell it's not a very serious art event. But we have a lot of fun. And now Zoom is having fun again, so I hope that you can hear me. But I'm going to play this last song. It's a song called Little Demons. And if you want, you can sing along in your houses. Freak all your family members out. And you're going to sing in your best lady voice. You're going to go. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. I saw no one's mouths moving, So just like Komal said, I can see you. Matthew's got his guitar. We're ready to jam. It's going to be a good one. And everyone's going to sing super loud, like the loudest you've ever sung in your whole life. You can even open up your window, sing for your neighbors. It's going to be great. Gonna go. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Oh, I see you, Matt. I'm gonna put this on gallery view now so I can see absolutely everybody. Because we always end a really good song with jazz hands. So that's what we're gonna do at the end of this one. I smile, I laugh in the face of danger. I am fine, I am all right, my dear monsieur. I know my habits, they seem like a plea. I'm out of excuses I keep on my sleeves. Close my eyes and improvise all these funny little lies. And I can't fight these demons anymore. No, 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 no. I don't fight these demons anymore. No, 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 no. I thought that we could sail on just a little farther, but we won't make it to the harbor. Seconds away with the wind in our sails, pulling it close and biting at nails. Close my eyes and improvise all these funny little eyes. And I can't fight these demons anymore. No, 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 no. I won't fight these demons anymore. No, 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 no. You've all been so wonderful. I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday. I look forward to continuing to email you all hundreds of times every day. My name is Danielle Allard. Feel free to connect with me anywhere online. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Ready to sing? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to sing. You're gonna go. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. One more time. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. And now this is the perfect moment for some jazz hands. Jazz hands, everybody. Da, da, da. Thanks so much, Michelle, for having me. Thank you for this beautiful event. And I want to see all you guys very soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. See you.